the Radio Today podcast with Jen Seyderhelm.
Welcome to the Radio Today podcast. Steve Ahern joins me again, and really two things to talk about this week. One is the launch of a brand new show that isn't a podcast or an audio product at all, as far as I can see, Kyle Sandilands Live. And the other thing I'd like to talk about, Steve, with you is something that is ARN related that I just want to flag as a very real possibility, but I'll come to that. We'll start with the launch of Kyle Sandilands Live on Monday. Monday, the first episode was technically difficult. I think you and I, Steve, we chatted on the day and had some different insights on the experience of it. You've listened to probably more than what I have done. How did you find day one?
Day one was a shambles, and in short, they should have had a full run through before going public. Having said that, though, it's a great stunt, isn't it, to get coverage, and the faults certainly got coverage everywhere, and we covered it. So I guess there's always two sides to it, but I've made a lot of studios. I've been usually the manager or the leader on studio refits in several large studios now, several companies. And there's a few things I learnt. The most recent refit of ABC Sydney, we moved to Parramatta, and that was all about visualising the studio as well. And I learnt a lot about lighting, camera angles, vision switching, etc. Then the rest of it is also basic audio studio refit. I wrote a column this week. It's on Radio Info and Radio Today, just trying to analyse it from a technical point of view. I mean, these things happen. You can't blame them. And, you know, as I said, pros and cons, you got a lot of coverage. So it might have been deliberate. I don't think so. I don't think you would deliberately muck up your first show if you had realised it. But there were, I think, a number of technical things that went wrong, from echo, which in my opinion was a series of open microphones that were going through a submixer, so they didn't probably have their own switches. And in the control room, you could hear everything for a while when those were on. And then people, after a while, talked really close to their microphone, and it was terrible. It was the proximity effect, it's called. It was far too close, and that was annoying too. Everything was wrong.
You haven't even mentioned the gay abandon of eating. Pet
Well,
peeve.
actually, yes, that's true, but it amused me that Kyle had a packet of Allen's snakes on his desk. I noticed that he took them away after I mentioned it in one of the columns. But, you know, it's perfect product placement. Now, just let me have my morning tea. I wonder if I can get a product placement deal from Aldi for
please
my
crinkle that paper a bit more.
Biscuits. Yeah, well, there was a lot of that going on too, wasn't it?
It drove me insane, Steve. It's one thing, you know, it's a cardinal sin of radio, isn't it, to have a mouthful of something and then try and talk. And one of my worst moments is, you know, listeners.
That's really terrible. You shouldn't do that.
So a listener brought in a cupcake and I took a bite and then opened the microphone to speak, and of course got a crumb stuck in my throat, and I did the full choke, and I was like, never again. And yet there was Kyle, you know, snake, rustle, eat, talk.
Yes,
just
very funny.
Yeah.
Although I must say, I think it'll start a trend. You know, if you're going to eat anything, snakes are pretty good. You're not going to get crumbs. You're going to get the sugar hit that you might have got if you were a coffee drinker. So, you know, he might start a trend.
Do you know there is a podcast, Steve, that is just someone eating and talking at the same time?
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, there is. Some people love that sound of like...
Oh dear.
My thoughts, I have similar ones to yourself. Going back couple of years, you will know that we all thought they were going to launch in Melbourne at the start of the year, and they waited till April. And that was largely driven by Kyle saying, I'm not starting until everything's right in the studio. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. And, there'll be words that might come back to haunt him.
Yes. And so I thought look, yes, you're right. He got so much mileage out of the tech issues, but I don't think the mileage that he wanted genuinely. But I thought what would have been a better move for him is that if he'd launched next Monday and if he'd done the sneaky trial launch this Monday that no one was expecting and everyone would be like, oh, it started. And imagine that. And then all the errors and so on in that would have been part of before the launch, ironed out, ready for the launch, but a surprise bonus for listeners.
That would have been a good way to do it, definitely. And as you say, it would have been a bonus and everyone would have forgiven him. Sometimes we go to theatre shows and we get the cheap tickets because they're the 2 or 3 previews before opening night, before it officially starts. And the director comes out and says, hello, you're here for a preview. We're going to look at what you do. We're going to see where you laugh and we'll keep fixing it up before launch night. And, if we make a mistake, we might have to reset and start again. So it would have been that kind of preview sort of approach, which probably would have worked. He would have still got the coverage, got the sympathy, and people wouldn't have worried about it. Having said that, though, I don't think his diehard fans worried about it. A couple of days later, I promised I wouldn't echo Kyle's exact words when he's swearing. So he referred to journalists as a word beginning with P. And he said, you're just looking for the negative stories, but my listeners are not looking for that. And in a way, he was right. The diehard fans, I was on there the first day. There were some small number of critical people, but others were kind of saying, there, Kyle, it'll be all right. We're just letting you know the sound doesn't sound good, but good to have you back, that sort of thing. So his diehard fans had the patience to sit through that first disaster. And I've got to say, well, it's Thursday now, we're recording, so there's been 3 more shows and they've turned out well. A few little glitches. The second day there was, and the third day, there was still about 30 seconds of silence before the faders went up. But overall, the telephone problems, the echo problems, and the mic problems were pretty much fixed. And every day it's getting slicker and slicker. Another technical thing that I observed is that he's got more like a PA mixer next to him. He hasn't got a studio desk. And when you look at all the XL plugs in the back of it, I think there's a lot of the microphones from the production area coming in as sub-mixers into that one. And I think that is a sub-mixer to another master mixer, because one morning when the sound wasn't coming out, all the faders were up that should be up. And then Slow Brian, as they call him, the tech, he went behind Kyle, tried some faders, didn't work. Then he went off camera and you could hear the volume coming up. So he must have gone to the master mixer desk, and that's where the fader was down. But when you've got, look at the people there. There's at least 3 other little mixers, maybe more, where Bruno talks, Mayo talks. When you've got Mary and Brooklyn in another studio as well. So, there's 3 or 4 sub-mixers. Then they come into presumably Kyle's desk, and then Kyle's desk goes elsewhere because they're feeding sound down various outputs like the video feed and things like that. It's a recipe for points of failure, as the technicians call it. There's 4, 5, 6 potential points of failure. So when you have that, then things are going to go wrong.
Oh, I think I can think of a good acronym for that, but I'll move on from it. I just want to go back to that first day, though, and say that there is this amazing study done by a university PhD student in Canberra saying when you don't address bad audio, things that are going on in the background of audio, your listeners at some subconscious level think you're less intelligent. And I found the Monday an exercise in that because it was such a cacophony of awful noise at times, unlistenable audio at moments, that I made some very subconscious judgments about the whole experience that I don't think Kyle would have wanted to start his listeners with to some extent. I hear what you're saying. I know I read many of the comments of people who were, it's all right, day 2 will be better, and day 2 was better, but the first day was so singularly unlistenable at times that I made some assumptions about the show going forward.
Fair comment, I think.
I also found, Steve, that one of the things that I took away from day 1 was the change in the way that Kyle spoke to people. At ARN, Brooklyn, Mayo, Alfie, although Alfie works for Kyle as well, but they worked with Kyle because ARN was paying them. Now they work for Kyle. And there was a lot of language to that extent. There was times where there was a moment where Kyle said to Bruno, "You are not talking to this person. You are talking and looking at me. No one else, just me." And I thought, this is different now.
Very interesting, given that Jackie still has a Fair Work action before the courts. And when you think about it, you think back to the defences that ARN are using. They're using a defence that she is a contractor to ARN's company, and, things will progress in legal arguments from there. But as you rightly say, we can assume that all those people now work directly for Kyle's company. And so there'll be a whole lot of workplace health and safety considerations and probably disclaimers in their contracts and various things that I hope have been carefully thought through. Having said that, though, we know that all those people, from what they've all said, they love working with Kyle and they understand the kind of show it is. As he said also on his show, you bleeps. This is a satirical show, he said. You don't understand it. So, I hope the employer company owned by Kyle has all of those things clearly in their own workplace contract agreements with their staff nowadays.
Yeah, but I have to reiterate again, you said it's for Kyle. And yeah. I really noticed the difference in that. One further thing that I read this morning, actually, is that Duncan Campbell writes some very interesting Substack pieces.
His Substack columns are fantastic.
And he's reflected today on how he would approach a conversation with Kyle to get a change in behaviour or outcome. And I'm going to paraphrase Duncan here, because I was thinking about this with regard to everyone now working for Kyle, because I feel that the only people who've worked with Kyle truly are Jackie O over the years, although something shifted when they went to Melbourne. And Duncan is another example to some extent. And what he said he did, and the story is extraordinary, is that if he needed to speak with Kyle, it was really hard to speak to Kyle one-on-one. He always had someone with him, kind of almost like a henchman. And often when Kyle was leaving, it was Pete Depler, who I think is interesting that Pete has stayed at ARN, but that's another conversation. What he did was that he sent a message so that he could get Kyle alone on the way to the car and that Pete would have to go back upstairs for something. And then on the process, and Kyle was in a really good mood, been a great show. And then Duncan had a conversation about, it was about rap music this particular day, and had put it in a nice umbrella. Rather than saying, I don't want this, he had spoken about how certain things had impacted other shows and how it doesn't land here. And without directly saying what he wanted, he got what he wanted, Duncan, that is, from there on in. But the whole process of that makes me, again, think about who had the capacity prior to their massive salaries with ARN to work with Kyle, not for him.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Managing talent in the media industry is a really tough gig for a manager or a program manager. And you do have to work out the time and the place where the person, if they're a big talent and they're highly valuable and you don't want to risk losing them, where the person is going to be receptive. And I think Duncan knows that. He's hugely experienced and knows that very well. And that's interesting. I haven't read that column yet, but I will. Duncan, by the way, will be at Radio Days. I'm doing a half-day workshop on forming teams and talent management and all that. And Duncan will be a guest for a part of that too. So if you're at Radio Days, you can ask him some questions about that because managing talent at the top level, especially someone like Kyle, who's on the record, as so many radio announcers are on the record over the years, of saying they had terrible air checks in the old days, from the old style of Austereo air check, where there might have been a samurai sword on the wall behind the program director, or the other example of someone throwing and catching a tennis ball against the wall with their feet up while saying, that was a terrible show. There were some stories over the years of horrible air checks, and no performer wants to be taken down or, even worse, ignored or belittled. They want feedback. My experience, if you do it right, is the best performers crave feedback, and they often have delicate egos. So they want the feedback, but they want you to tell them in a way that will help them understand and receive that. And they don't want to know just what's wrong. They want to know what's right. And my approach is, this worked really well today, do more of that. There was a couple of things here which we shouldn't do for this reason. I'll suggest that we do this or that. So, no point just telling somebody something's terrible. Tell them what to do about it. And as a program director, if you haven't thought of a better way to do it, then keep your mouth shut till you do, because that's not helpful. That's just going to knock their confidence.
You made a really interesting point there, in that you didn't say you should do that. You said, I suggest that we could do that, right? One of the things I've also found with Kyle this week that I had not really clicked to is how personal he makes it when you say or do something that he doesn't like.
Yes. Well, we have an example on the Radio Today comments feed. We've written various stories during the week, and we've got various comments. Let me just pull it up here on my screen. Red Fox says, I think Kyle is a trailblazer. He's had the courage to do it. A lot of people say they're going to do something, but they never do it. And then we've got people who think that we are just covering Kyle too much. What's that? The first guy saying... Oh,
which we've done this last...
Gee, surprise, surprise. We have another fascinating story about deleted Kyle. Riveting story. So, we're covering it. What's his name? Extra worker. Ex-radio worker. Ex-radio worker. We are covering this because we're a professional radio industry publication, and this is the biggest story of the week, the month, and perhaps the year. So we will be looking at this. If you don't like it, then go away. But ex-radio worker has not gone away, and he's made some other comments. Here we go again. I actually worked with Kyle in 3 markets, he says. I'm not bitter and definitely not sad. Left radio of my own accord, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the next comment below that is Kyle Sandilands. Hello, everyone. The ex-radio worker is full of shit, and there is no one that has worked with me across 3 markets. So please stop pretending that your pathetic comments matter. So, yes, you are right. Kyle doesn't take certain types of criticism well. And, of course, we must remember that, as Kyle says, it's a satirical show, so we can read his comments with a touch of satire in them.
Yeah.
But anyway, follow the comments on Radio Today, because I think they're very interesting from all points of view.
Yes, I will add the addendum that in workplaces, the whole "it was a joke, that person just can't take a joke" doesn't land in HR all the time. But
so true. Actually, you are right. We live in a different age and a different workplace. Yes. And we should. Yep. We should.
I want to stay with ARN, but from a different light, because what I feel genuinely is the other brewing story of great significance in Australia and for New Zealand is SEG, so Sports Entertainment Group, which owns Sports Entertainment Network, the range of sporting stations in Australia.
Track and those, yep.
They have purchased MediaWorks New Zealand, which owns only music stations, but about 60% of that sort of core 25 to 60 share of ear. Now, that's a huge story that they've
I know. I did not see that coming. Amazing.
And they've outbid Nova. Subtext to this is that I think both of them in a way showed their hands beforehand. Nova actually set up The Rock, the New Zealand station that's owned by MediaWorks, as a DAB Plus station in Brisbane, and did a nice little launch with it all. And at the time I was like, oh, that's interesting, putting a New Zealand station onto DAB in Brisbane, see how it goes. But now I realise that Nova was looking to buy the network, and that would have been we'll do this and start this process going as we put in our bid. SEN have done Bunnings Tradio. Now, Triple M had done something like Tradio beforehand, and blow me down if in its first rating, so it was in the ratings last survey 4, it did all right. There is a space for DAB plus tradie style radio that aligns with Triple M, but it's SEN's first foray back into music for a long time. If you recall, Steve, when they bought 1170, they tried to maintain the classic hits for a bit. They tried to move it onto a sort of online platform. Didn't work, and Craig Hutchison, who I have a lot of time for, at the time said, sports is our wheelhouse. We're not a music network, and it's just not worked for us. Or I'm paraphrasing that, but he acknowledged that it wasn't right for what they're aiming for. Now, SEG has bought shares into ARN. And there's lots of people who bought shares into ARN because we know that SCA, or the merged network, has quite a large shareholding in it. We know that ARN tried to buy SCA a little while ago, but the Australian has said that SEG is really interested in buying ARN.
Yeah, I find that such an interesting turnaround. There was a tiny niche station and a niche business that's now been building step by step. And we must remember there's a lot of money in gambling advertising, so that's part of it. In Australia, there's some rules that might come in that would change it. I wonder if those rules are in New Zealand. I'll bet they're not. And that could be very interesting and strategic too. But how incredible to see a little network growing the way it has. Of course, it's a public company, and so they're using investors' money to grow. But it's, we've seen in their annual reports, there's good revenue coming in. There's an audience for specialist programming. So why shouldn't they? And I'm just getting up on my screen here. SEG, so Sports Entertainment Group, which owns SEN, the share price Thursday, today, as we're looking at it, is 30 cents a share for the listed parent public company. Now, if I pull up ARN Media, stock exchange code A1N, the price is 25 cents a share. And, we've talked about the share price changing and the share value going down over time with changes at ARN. But, on share price alone, SEG is more valuable than ARN. Of course, the market value is different. But, if you were playing with the idea, you would be looking at your share price, your price to earnings ratio, your earnings per share value for investors. And who knows, maybe SEG would make an interesting bid for shares in ARN. There's a lot of technicalities when you do these sort of proposed takeovers of public companies, but still, why not?
I have further thoughts on this. I've thought a lot about what this would look like. Craig Hutchison might want to ring me. So
he might put a comment on the forum and, next to Kyle's.
Maybe. With the MediaWorks sale, and in fact, I reckon a core part of why he's bought it is that is Rover. Rover is like Listener, SCA's Listener, that MediaWorks built from the ground up, right? So I don't think that SEG has any interest in the iHeart relationship that ARN has, because now they've got Rover. So there's one thing. Don't want iHeart, don't want anything to do with that. As you know, Steve, and many of our listeners will know, that you can't have three stations in a market. And if SEG was to buy ARN, they would have three stations in Sydney and Melbourne, which is not an option for them. I think that what SEG is eyeing off, this is my own opinions on this, is the gold network side of things. The bit that ARN was looking to offload for a bit there, because if they take the gold network, they get a station in Adelaide and they get a station in Western Australia. Sorry, in Perth, I should say, which SEG does not currently have. They have, those N-band frequency stations, and DAB plus stations, but they could get Little Cruise in Adelaide and Gold 96 in Perth. And I think that SEG has great interest in those two stations to get the sports presence in Adelaide and Western Australia, where their AFL coverage does so well.
It's a good business theory. It makes sense.
It does.
I've been looking at the price to earnings ratio and the earnings per share and revenue and profit. ARN, in its last report to the stock exchange, reported $285 million of revenue and $34 million minus $34 million profit. SEG's revenue is less than half of that. It's $110 million, but $22 million of clear profit. Earnings per share at SEG, 0.003, so tiny earnings per share. Earnings per share of ARN, 1 cent per share, so 0.016 earnings per share. So, there's some monetary reasons why investors in ARN might consider an approach from SCG. So you've outlined the strategic reasons of those markets. And then when you look at the money side, sure, ARN shareholders have been complaining about the falling share price for some time. Maybe they'd be interested in joining a company that has a share price that's 5 cents per share higher than the one they're in now. Fascinating theory.
Yeah, and remember that SCG was well and truly in the running for Nine Radio. And by missing out on that, they didn't get the West Australian station there. They weren't getting an Adelaide one anyway. But that's something that I'm sure has been on Hutchie's wish list, to have a station in Perth and Adelaide for which he can have his own AFL coverage, which at the moment, we know, well, I know the Adelaide and WA fans love their AFL. And SEN having a foothold there would make a huge difference. As to what they would do with gold in Sydney and Melbourne, I don't know. But he perhaps would just let them keep running as they are for a period of time. But that's my thoughts.
And that was the strategy, as you said earlier, about Classic Hits 2CH. He left that running for a while.
Yeah, he did. And, I mean, he's going to have to make decisions with all the MediaWorks music stations eventually, or just leave them running too if he's got the right people in place. So there is a massive change afoot. And I feel like we really should be watching what's happening with ARN. I have no idea if SCG bought all of it, hypothetically, what would then happen with the ongoing court battle with Jackie O. I don't know what...
Oh, my goodness. What a thought.
I know, but...
Well, it would still be a listed company, so the company would have to deal with it. So, yes, I guess he would inherit that, which would be a reason not to do a deal.
No, or not to do a deal with the...
Or to settle before the deal is done. Now we're speculating.
Oh, now we're speculating. But, that decision isn't really in ARN's hands, I don't think, at the moment. So,
possibly not, yeah.
But I think that the gold proposition is very enticing indeed. And I can see the gains hugely for SEG if they were able to obtain those stations that for a while there ARN was going to basically offload or really treated with huge disrespect considering how well Sydney and Melbourne do.
Yes, one former senior employee of ARN said that they felt like they were the aged old grandpa dribbling in the corner, that they'd been pushed into a corner in their wheelchair and, nobody really wanted them at the party. So if there is still that kind of thinking around gold, well, certainly they wouldn't like to hear that they might just be on the side of any new purchase. But on the other hand, if you could turn that around and make them part of something bigger, then there might be benefit all round. And I guess just also while thinking about the numbers, the financing on this, we must say that to purchase those those stations in New Zealand, SCG also had raised a debt facility. I think it was with the Commonwealth Bank. So there's a lot of debt that went into buying those stations.
Yes, I am very aware of that. I still thought that 110 Australian dollars all up was a pretty good deal for what SCG got. They've done,
I think so too,
very well while still flying under the radars. But on ARN, no more via this podcast. That's it for this week. That sort of covers off, two topics only, but gosh, they're...
Well, big topics. I'm just going back to Kyle's product placement. I'm reading this book by Georgie Tunney. Over to you. It's mainly about television. But it's a really enjoyable read. And I mention it because she's doing a podcast. She's doing a sports podcast for ARN. And also, I think she's a talent that radio is starting to look at, as well as her television profile as well. So very interesting and a good read so far. I'm enjoying the story.
The little side mention there that she was one of the people who was in line to replace Jackie O on
Exactly.
Kiss.
Yes.
Food for thought. We will be back with more in a fortnight's time, and anything could happen between now and then.
I know. Wow. What a time to be in radio. We will be back at that time, and we must also tell our listeners that if you want to go to Radio Days Asia, it's on in the first week of September in Jakarta. If you haven't booked your ticket yet, book it. Because it's always a great conference, and you and I will be there reporting it and also speaking. I'll do a workshop and you'll be doing a presentation on podcasting.
The changing nature of podcasting, yeah.
Yes, that's right. We'll have plenty to talk about. And I've also volunteered you to host some sessions as well. So our listeners will see plenty of you on the Radio Days Asia stage in Jakarta. We're hoping for no protests this year.
No, that would be wonderful. But a lot to cover while we're over there. And always these conferences, I come out afterwards with new information I had no idea wasn't even on my radar. So it's always a great experience.
There's so much there. They bring the best speakers from Radio Days Europe and now Radio Days North America as well. I've been looking at the lineup because I'm involved in that. And there's some really good speakers, and it's always valuable to go to a conference like that because you come away with things that you knew, but maybe a different perspective on them, and always new things that you didn't know that you can take back and use to do better.
I will add that Radio Days Europe, I took away that Chris Fade was going to host ARN breakfast, and blow me down, that was correct, except he turned it down. So
yes,
you never
that's
know.
Right. You got that scoop direct from Radio Days Europe. I wonder what scoops we'll get at Radio Days Asia. Watch Radio Info and Radio Today. We'll be filing stories from there as well as covering everything else that's going on.
And we'll catch you in a fortnight.
See ya.
Radio Today with Jen Seyderhelm. Find more at radiotoday.com.au.